GamingBolt presents 15 generational shifting moments in video games. There are those special moments in gaming history that would go on to change how we think about gaming forevermore. Maybe you've had the pleasure of living through some of these moments, and maybe we've seen some in recent memory that need more time to percolate to be felt. But let's look back on 15 generational shifting moments in video games together. Nintendo Switch reveal. Nintendo was coming off of the Wii U and very much had everything to prove. All eyes were on the January reveal for Nintendo to show us what they had, and luckily, they came out of the gate swinging with a strong concept, still housing that Nintendo uniqueness with their 3 ice cubes and many amazing reveals including Super Mario Odyssey. It was a long road, but Nintendo's return to prominence began here. Sony at E3 2013. Back when the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One hype cycles were hitting their peak, there was a lot of discussion around where used games would fit into this new world order, thanks to Microsoft's original plans. Off the back of those, there was worry that Sony would cave to publishers and also put in some draconian limits on them. But there was a simple instructional video at E3 2013. Sony showed that they were more for the gamers. The applause was so loud it even drowned out the PS Plus Online requirement they snuck in there. Metal Gear Solid 2. Metal Gear Solid was a darling of the PlayStation, but Metal Gear Solid 2, probably Kojima's best title for a number of reasons, was shown off at E3 2000, and marks the moment that the power of the PlayStation 2 was truly shown off on a grand stage, and what started that long road to 100 million units. Wii Sports. A gaming console that anyone could play might have been the design goal of Nintendo's super popular Wii system, but to really capture that, Nintendo needed a game that solidified that concept to where the Wii could be explained within a sentence, and that was universal enough for anyone to enjoy. Wii Sports provided that one-to-one sales pitch for motion controls that captured imaginations, and senior homes are still bowling to this day. The jump to HD. They say there were 2 major jumps in gaming history. The first was 3D, which we'll come to, and the second was the jump to HD. Suddenly, smaller details could be perceived, and between this and displays becoming larger in general, the new real estate allowed developers flexibility in both directions, zooming out of the action to give a wider perspective, or zooming in on something closer than ever to see the detail. We're seeing something similar to this with the 4K revolution, but nothing will ever really capture this leap. Mortal Kombat. Mortal Kombat challenged gamers to test their might, but around release, Mortal Kombat was testing the limits of what the mass market would find tasteful. The violent imagery in a medium still very fresh off of Nintendo bringing it back with family-friendly, highly curated content. It's highly oversimplifying to say that Mortal Kombat would go on to create the ESRB, but it is the game you can point to as to what got the ball rolling on the industry self-regulating. Xbox Live. The console was the console, and the PC was the PC. That was how it was, the natural order of things. One for StarCraft LAN parties, and one for late-night pizza and Mario Kart with the boys. They lived in harmony with each other, but everything changed when Xbox Live hit the scene. Suddenly, it was a simple matter to throw down in Dead or Alive with a friend across the country, or fire a sniper round in Des Moines and have it land in some poor sap's head in London. Xbox Live would, for better or worse, change the entire face of multiplayer gaming. SEGA exits. SEGA was at one point the crown prince of the gaming industry thanks to savvy marketing against an impossible rival. More on that later. While the rapid release and abandonment of different Genesis add-ons like the 32X is where things truly started, it was the bungling of the Saturn where we reached the point of no return. Saturn was given a surprise release 6 months ahead of time, breaking the trust of developers and retailers. They dropped it so fast that they broke the trust of gamers, and by the time they were pushing the Dreamcast with that lack of trust, there were far more compelling reasons to wait for the PlayStation 2. The failure of the Dreamcast forced Sega's hand into becoming a third-party developer. Nintendo 64. While it wasn't the first console to be focused on 3D gameplay, and, oh, we'll get there, the Nintendo 64 was the home of many titles that influenced game design to this day. It earns this specific entry on this list, however, because of Nintendo's introduction of the analog stick. The stick, by being omnidirectional and pressure-sensitive, introduced a natural-feeling way to move in 3D space in a way that the universal D-pad was not fit for, and even changed the competing PlayStation brand forever. PlayStation. And the PlayStation is just as deserving of its own entry as the N64. Let's gloss over the long, repeated story about how it was Nintendo who gave rise to PlayStation and celebrate some of the industry-defining things Sony introduced with their first gaming console. It made CD technology mainstream, which resulted in several other trends like FMVs. It was the first primarily 3D-focused console. Saturn tried to split the difference. They even eventually came up with the dual analog controller, then the now ubiquitous DualShock in response to the N64, taking the single stick and giving it a partner to allow for camera control, a revelation to the point you don't see a controller on the market today without two sticks. Game Boy. Turns out that Nintendo making revelatory systems out of old hardware isn't a very new trend. Launching within the generation that was beginning to push technological boundaries with the Super Nintendo and Genesis, and directly competing against far more powerful competition like the Sega Game Gear, the Game Boy didn't shine technically like Sega's offerings, but the Game Boy would prove the old wisdom that content is king. The fact it had the processing power of today's graphic calculators and the puke green screen to match didn't matter when phenomena like Tetris and Pokemon Red and Blue would rocket the little gray brick to stardom. Genesis does what Nintendo don't. For people who grew up during the meteoric rise of the Nintendo Entertainment System, Nintendo was quite literally video games, with few who could even dream of that crown. Some were unhappy under the tight fist of Mario and wanted some more edge to their games. The snappy marketing campaign, Genesis does what Nintendo don't, was the clarion call for those who would dare sample some of the raw 90s attitude that Sega would come to embody. And at least for a short time, Sega would enjoy their moment on the throne before a series of bad decisions would remove them from the console market. NES and Super Mario Bros. It was a dark time for gaming, and we needed a hero. It turns out that hero happened to be a short Italian who would save the Mushroom Kingdom. Some ingenious marketing that danced around video games just enough in a time when they were looked at with disdain, matched with a revolutionary video game that took the play beyond a single screen and onto a full adventure, were the first blocks in rebuilding gaming into what it is today, at least after E.T. and the crash of 1983. The gaming industry in the age of the Atari 2600 was a perilous place, with little oversight and a flood of releases about almost anything, like a game done to advertise dog food. Gamers were already losing faith in the industry because they were feeling like money was coming before a quality, fun experience. Why am I getting some deja vu right now? But E.T. is legendary in being that final straw that saw the North American market reject video games en masse and kicking off the great crash of 1983. Pac-Man and Donkey Kong. You can't really consider any moment more paradigm shifting than the moment when video games first caught the attention of a wide audience. Games existed before and have existed since, but none caught the attention of a market outside of computer nerds and literally created the audience for the industry quite like these two greats. And that'll be about it for this one. If you guys like what we're doing at GamingBolt, please consider subscribing to our channel, and I'll see you guys on the next video.